In today's game, we are going to discuss a game played between Alireza Firouzja versus Anton Korobov. Alireza is basically from Iran. Now, at present, he is in France, and he is considered to be the next challenger to Magnus Carlsen. And he is a very sharp and fierce player, and he likes to play very sharp openings. And in this game, he also chose the Sicilian, and Anton Korobov went for the Sicilian nudge draw. So by going through this video, you will also understand the concept behind the Sicilian nudge draw variation, which was one of the most favorites of previous world champion Garry Kasparov. He was the world champion for 15 years by winning from Anatoly Karpov, and it was his favorite weapons. So Alireza is white and Anton Korobov black. Alireza opted for e4, Anton opted for c5 in defense. We will go through the opening quickly. Knight f3, controlling the square because white wants to move this on b4. d6. Today this is considered to be the standard reply, whereas around about 10 years before, or 9 to 10 years before, knight to c6 was considered the best response. d4 was played, hitting the center and hitting this pawn on c5, d into d4, knight into d4, and knight f6, hitting this pawn immediately. The reason behind playing knight f6 first is that if black plays the move over here, knight c6, then white could opt for this Marcosi type structure, and that is c4. And to avoid this type of structure, Marcosi structure, black played the move in the game knight f6 instead of playing knight c6. So we go back, knight into 1 and knight f6 was played. Knight c3 was played, protecting this pawn on e4, a6, and this is the start of the nudge draw variation. Trying to take hold of the square b5 and avoiding the check of bishop on b5 black. Bishop g5 was played, knight bd7, bishop c4 was played, and this was one of the favorite moves of Bobby Fischer, one of the most prominent world champions in the history of chess, who became world champion by defeating Boris Spassky of Russia. Here queen a5 was played instead of here. In the database, the main moves which are being played are two moves. One is queen to b6 and second is e6. But here Anton went for a sideline, and that was queen to a5. Let's check out that the first move, queen to b6, and then we will check a brief introduction to, I will give you people to e6 move. Black plays over here queen b6, then the reply may be bishop to b3. The reason behind is that white is going to play the move d2, queen d2, and then he is going to castle queen side, and then he is going to get the blacking by playing this pawn strong on the king side. So e6 is going to be played by black, developing this bishop on e7, queen d2, going with the plan, bishop e7, f3, protecting this pawn on e4. In future, white gets into trouble if it does not protect this pawn, because after something that white plays the knight to c5 and bishop to d7, and then he brings his rook to c8, and in some instances he's going to take this exchange this knight on c3. So white is doing all this stuff which might going to be happen in future, and he might be under threat. So he's protecting pawn on e1 first by playing the move f3. At c5, the best reply, best continuation in the opening. h4 and queen g7, taking the queen to c7 to play these moves like b5, a5, and b4, a4 to hit on the white's king side, because white is going to castle here, because as he has moved his pawn from h to h4 and f3, and these pawns are on their initial squares. So black replies with g4, immediate attack in the center and delaying the king side castling, queen side castling for 1 or 2 moves. So we go back to our game where queen a5 was played, and we are going to look at e6 move also. e6 is being played. The next reply is castle, short castle. It gets into positional struggle instead of very sharp tactical struggle. This move. Now queen a5 and queen d2. Strengthening this bishop, as this queen a5 was hitting this bishop on g5, and h6 and bishop h4, bishop e7, dividing the pieces, and rook ad1. Structure may arise after the move if black plays e6, and we have already discussed the move queen b6 over here. Now let's go back to our main move which was played in the game, and that was queen a5. After that, queen d2, going for the castle on the queen side. h6 was played. Instead of it was better to play the move e6 and develop the bishop to e7. But Anton delayed on this development and played the move h6. So after h6, bishop and f6 was played, knight into f6, and long castle. And white goes for it, and white's development has been completed. Whereas black's bishop on c8 and bishop on f8 are still on their initial squares, and these two rooks are doing nothing. They are not coordinated with each other, and white's king has still get into castle. After that, e6 was played, trying to develop the bishop on e7, bishop e3, bringing the bishop to b3. The reason behind is that to stop black from playing this move d5 with tempo. If the bishop is still over here and black plays this move d5, it is with tempo, and white has to move over here, and then black can develop his bishop to anywhere. So white comes first to be bishop b3, so that black does not get tempo on his bishop over here. Bishop e7, king b1, protecting the square for future by the king. Bishop d7 was played, f4. Now bringing the strong on the king side, black's king side. Rook c8 was played, rook he1 standard. White wants to play this move e5, and he is bringing all his forces to this e5. Rook c5 was played, protecting this pawn. this thrust of white on this e file. Queen e2 was playing, still stressing that I am going to play this move e5 and castle, and now the e5 comes. D into e5, f into e5. The reason behind this was to play this move e5 was to open this f file for his rooks on e1 and on d, and for his queen on e2. After that, knight h7 was played. There was no better move than playing to knight h7, although black's position is worse over here and white is on in driving seat actually. Knight f5 was played. A little bit tactics that if you take my knight, I am going to take your bishop over here. Queen d8 was played, protecting this bishop on d7, and queen d3 was played. Instead of here, it was better to play the move f2, hitting the rook over here, and this controlling of the f half open f5. Now, if the pawn would take, pawn takes the knight over here, then queen can take this pawn. If bishop takes, then rook can take this queen over here. Or white can delay sequence of moves. And the other reason was that if you don't take it, I am going to take your bishop with check, and then you will take with your queen, and I am going to double my rook on the d file. Rook c7 was played in the game. After that, rook e4, and this is a beautiful mate played by Alireza Firouzja, as bringing this rook to over here on e4 and immediately doubling this on d file, and also for future bringing this rook to rook g4, attacking the king on here. And these types of move which differentiate weaker players from the grandmaster. Bishop c5 was played, and knight g3. Now the game roundabout becomes equal. Instead of here, it was better try the move knight d4 here. Knight d4. After that, bishop c8, knight into pawn, queen into queen, knight into c7, queen into d1, check, knight into d1, rook d8, rook e1, and this is all completely sharp and very tactical moves being played and threatening moves, and white and black both have to give the response immediately. Knight g5, knight c3, bishop a7, h4, hitting the knight over here, and knight e6. Now in this variation, you could see that black is a pawn down actually, but he could draw this game, but by playing very accurately. But so we come back to our main game where knight g3 was played, and this was a rapid game played in a world championship match. So both players have less time. After that, queen g5 was played, h4, and queen e7, and that was the blunder of the game. Here the best move was to play the move queen g6, pinning this rook to this queen, and rook f4, and exchanging these queens of white. Then the black's game would be better after playing this move For example, rook to e8 or rook to c8, bringing bishop out of the harm's way, playing knight to f8, and then to d7. So it was better for black. This continuation was better instead of playing the move to e7, and that was a blunder. And Alireza did not play also the good move over here, and he played the move rook g4. Instead of it, he should have gone for knight h5 immediately. After that, if black plays this move to g6, then he could come rook g4, and then he could bring over his queen over here on g3. So we go back with our game where rook g4 was played, and after that black responses with king h8, knight h5, g6, knight f4, and white has bring all of his heavy artillery on the king's hand and hitting this pawn on g6, which is very weak. Rook g8 was played. Instead of it, bishop e8 was a better try, protecting this pawn with the bishop instead of protecting it with the rook on f8. So the game continuation might be like this: knight e4, rook d7, knight d6, and pawn h5, rook g3, and queen into pawn, rook f3, queen g4, queen c3, hitting this bishop, and rook c7. And in this variation, black is a pawn up, which he took on h4, but white still has a fair stack in his position as this knight is very good placed on d6. We go back to our game where rook g8 was played. After that, knight e4, h5, knight into h5, g into h5, rook into g8 check, king into g8, queen g3 check, king h8, and knight f6, and queen f8, knight into d7, and queen g7. And this was the blunder which caused and torn the game. Instead of it, queen d8 was a better try. After that, queen d3, bishop e7, c3, knight f8, knight into f8, queen into d3 check, rook into d3, bishop into f8. Now you could see that white is basically a pawn up, and he has one isolated pawn, and he has three islands, pawn islands, whereas black also has three pawn islands. But this game is indeed could win for a draw in right line, because this pawn on h5 is immediately going to fall. After white takes the move bishop to d1, and it is very hard for black to draw this position. I would say that white is winning over here. So we go back to our main game where queen g7 was played. After queen g7, queen f3, still holding this threat on f7 pawn and this controlling this half open file f5, queen g4, asking white to exchange the queens over here, but it is not in white's favor to exchange it because he is good in his position. So he comes back to queen f1, bishop f2, that if you will take this bishop, I am going to take this rook with checkmate. c3 was played. give heir to king and not go for in a back range checkmate. Alireza played the move c3. The idea behind it was that queen into h4, bishop c2, knight g5, knight f6, still controlling the squares around the black king. Rook c8 was played to control this back rank, because if black plays something over here like this and the base move, then rook is going to give check, and then it is going to give check over here, and after that it is going to be mate. So rook c8, queen e2 was played and bishop c5, and that was basically a blunder, because instead of it, black should have tried bishop b6 and g3, although here black is roundabout completely lost. So in the game, bishop c5 was played. After that, knight into h5, bishop e7, g3, queen h3, knight f4, hitting the queen over here, queen h6, bringing the queen out of the harm's way, and queen g2. Yeah, asking black that I am going to bring my rook to h1, and yeah, I'm going to pin your queen over here on h6. So black played the move queen g7 and queen into b7, and now out of these two, whether rook, whether bishop on e7, one of them is going to fall. So here Antonio Borgo resigned the game. This is a very fierce battle which may originate from the nudge draw variation of Sicilian defense, and there is too much theory in nudge draw. If you want to prepare nudge draw, you have to memorize and understand a lot of lines and their variations and the reasons behind the moves, and you should be a sharp player. Study nudge draw. A tactical, you must have a very great tactical eye. So if you liked my video, kindly subscribe and hit the bell icon button. Thank you.